It is the third day of a wedding in a small village called Cana, and something has gone horribly wrong. The wine has run out. To you, that might sound like a minor problem. But in this world, in this culture, it is a humiliation the family will carry for years. The host is about to be shamed in front of his entire town. And in the corner, a woman leans over to her son and says 4 quiet words that will change human history. They have no wine. What her son does next is the first of them. The first sign. The first time the ordinary laws of the world simply bent around a single man from Nazareth. For the next 3 years, it would happen again, and again, and again. Water becomes wine. A storm goes silent at a word. Bread multiplies in his hands until thousands are fed. The blind blink into a world they have never seen. And on 3 separate occasions, the dead sit up and breathe. This is not a story about magic tricks. This is not a story about a man breaking the rules to show off. This is not a story about random acts of wonder scattered through an old book. Every single miracle Jesus performed was pointing at something. Each one was a sign with an arrow on it. And tonight, I want to walk you through them, from the water at Cana to the moment outside a tomb that left an entire crowd unable to speak. Because by the end, you are going to see the one pattern hiding underneath all of them. And I promise you this. The greatest miracle he ever performed was not raising someone from the dead. It was something stranger and quieter, and we will get to it. But not yet. Stay with me. Let's go back to that wedding. When his mother tells him the wine is gone, Jesus points to 6 stone jars standing nearby. Each one holds 20 or 30 gallons. He tells the servants to fill them to the brim with water. Then he tells them to draw some out and carry it to the master of the feast. And somewhere between the jar and the cup, the water is no longer water. The master tastes it, stunned, and says the thing everyone is thinking. You saved the best wine for last. Here is what most people miss about Cana. There were no theatrics. No shout. No wave of the hand. Most of the people at that party never even knew a miracle had happened. The Greek word John uses is not the word for a magic wonder. It is the word semeion. A sign. Something that points beyond itself. And it points to this. Wherever this man shows up, the thing that has run dry gets filled again, and what comes back is better than what was lost. Hold on to that idea. The thing that ran dry, filled again. Because you are going to see it everywhere. Now watch what happens when the need gets more desperate than an empty cup. There is a man who cannot walk. He has friends, and his friends have heard that Jesus is teaching inside a house in Capernaum. But when they arrive, the crowd is so thick they cannot get him through the door. So they do something insane. They climb onto the roof. They dig through it, tearing a hole in the clay and branches, and they lower their paralyzed friend down on his mat, right in front of Jesus, interrupting everything. And here is the part that confused everyone in the room. Jesus looks at the paralyzed man and does not say, "Be healed." He says, "Your sins are forgiven." The religious leaders are furious. Who can forgive sins but God alone, they think. And Jesus answers their thoughts out loud. Which is easier, he asks, to say your sins are forgiven, or to say get up and walk? Then, so that you may know the Son of Man has authority, he turns to the man. Get up. Take your mat. Go home. And the man does. Do you see what he just did? He used the healing you can see to prove the forgiveness you cannot. The miracle of the body was a sign pointing at a miracle of the soul. That is the pattern. Pay attention to it, because he is about to do it over and over again. There is a man covered in leprosy, a disease that did not just rot the body, it exiled you from every person you loved. Lepers were not allowed to be touched. Not by anyone. For years, maybe decades, no human hand had felt this man's skin. He falls in front of Jesus and says, "If you are willing, you can make me clean." And before he heals him, Jesus does the unthinkable. He reaches out his hand and touches him. He touches the untouchable. The healing was a miracle. But the touch, before the healing, was the message. Here is the part nobody tells you. The miracles were never only about fixing a problem. They were about reaching a person. And sometimes the person reached for him first. There was a woman who had been bleeding for 12 years. 12 years of doctors. 12 years of spending everything she had. 12 years of being considered unclean, untouchable, cut off. She had heard about Jesus, and she had one desperate thought. If I can just touch the edge of his clothes, I will be healed. So she pushed through the crowd, reached out, and brushed the hem of his robe. And instantly, she felt it. The bleeding stopped. She tried to slip away unseen. But Jesus stopped and asked, "Who touched me?" Out of an entire crowd pressing against him, he had felt one trembling hand of faith. And he did not scold her. He called her daughter. "Daughter, your faith has made you well." After 12 years of no one daring to touch her, the first word she hears is a word of belonging. And faith did not even need to be in the same room. A Roman centurion, an officer of the occupying army, came to Jesus because his servant was dying. Jesus said he would come to the house. But the soldier said something that stunned him. "Lord, I am not worthy to have you come under my roof. Just say the word, and my servant will be healed. I am a man under authority, and I understand how authority works." And Jesus turned to the crowd and said he had not found faith like this in all of Israel. The servant was healed in that very hour, miles away, by nothing but a word. The power was never in the touch. The power was in the one giving the command. There was a man who had been lying by a pool called Bethesda for 38 years, waiting for a healing that never came. 38 years. Longer than many people in that day even lived. And Jesus asked him a strange question. "Do you want to be made well?" It sounds almost cruel, until you realize how many of us quietly make peace with the thing that is killing us. The man made excuses, said he had no one to help him into the water. And Jesus cut through all of it. "Get up, take your mat, and walk." And after 38 years on the ground, the man stood up. And not everyone said thank you. One day, 10 men with leprosy called out to Jesus from a distance, and he told them to go show themselves to the priests. As they went, they were healed, all 10 of them. But only one of them, a Samaritan, a foreigner, turned around. He came back, fell at Jesus' feet, and thanked him. And Jesus asked the question that still echoes. Were not 10 cleansed? Where are the other 9? 10 received the miracle. Only 1 received the relationship. Do not be one of the 9 who takes the gift and forgets the giver. Let me pause for just a moment. If these scenes are coming alive for you, if you are starting to see the pattern underneath them, do me one quick favor and subscribe. Bringing the gospel stories back in full color is the entire reason this channel exists, and you being here genuinely keeps it alive. Now let's keep going, because the stakes are about to leave the houses and move out onto the open water. It is night, on the Sea of Galilee, and the disciples are going to die. A storm has come down on the lake so violently that these men, professional fishermen who have spent their whole lives on this water, are certain the boat is going under. And Jesus is asleep in the back. They wake him, screaming over the wind. "Do you not care that we are perishing?" He stands up. He speaks to the storm the way you would speak to a misbehaving child. "Peace. Be still." And the wind stops. Not slowly. Instantly. The water goes flat as glass. And the disciples are now more afraid of the calm than they ever were of the storm. "Who is this," they whisper, "that even the wind and the sea obey him?" Because in their scriptures, in the Psalms they had memorized as boys, there was exactly one person who commanded the seas and stilled the waves. And it was not a prophet. It was God himself. The signs are getting louder. And they are all whispering the same name. Then comes the day that is so important it is the only miracle, besides the resurrection, recorded in all 4 Gospels. A crowd of 5,000 men, plus women and children, has followed Jesus into a deserted place, and they are hungry. The disciples want to send them away. Jesus says, "You give them something to eat." All they can find is a boy with 5 small loaves and 2 fish. A child's lunch. Jesus takes it, looks up to heaven, gives thanks, and begins to break the bread. And it does not run out. The disciples carry basket after basket into the crowd, and everyone eats until they are full, and there are 12 baskets of leftovers. The thing that ran dry, filled again, and there was more at the end than the beginning. Where have you heard that before? But it gets stranger. That same night, the disciples are back on the water, and Jesus comes to them, walking on the surface of the sea. Peter, in a moment of wild faith, asks to come to him, and for a few impossible steps, a fisherman walks on water too. Until he looks at the waves. Until he remembers what is and is not possible. And he begins to sink. And the hand that calmed the storm reaches down and catches him. You of little faith, Jesus says, why did you doubt? Even the rescue is a sign. The moment you take your eyes off him, you start to go under. The moment you cry out, he is already reaching. And then there was the man no one could help. He lived among the tombs in the region of the Gerasenes, naked, screaming, cutting himself with stones. They had tried to chain him, and he had snapped the chains. He was so tormented that an entire town had simply given up on him. When Jesus asked his name, the voice that answered was not his own. My name is Legion, it said, for we are many. A legion was a Roman army unit of thousands. This man was not carrying one demon. He was carrying an army. And Jesus, with a word, set him free. When the townspeople came out, they found the wild man they had chained for years sitting calmly at Jesus' feet, clothed, and in his right mind. The miracle here was not over a disease, or a storm, or even death. It was over the darkness itself. There was no power, seen or unseen, that did not answer to his voice. Now we have to talk about the ones that frighten people the most. The blind. There was a man, blind from birth, and Jesus did something almost embarrassing. He spat on the ground, made mud with the dirt, smeared it on the man's eyes, and told him to go wash in a pool called Siloam. And the man came back seeing. The religious leaders dragged him in for questioning, trying to trap him, trying to make him deny what had happened. And this simple man gave one of the bravest answers in the Bible. I do not know everything, he says. One thing I know. I was blind, and now I see. There was another blind man, a beggar named Bartimaeus, sitting by the road outside Jericho. When he heard that Jesus was passing by, he began to shout, Jesus, Son of David, have mercy on me. The crowd told him to be quiet. They were embarrassed by him. But he only shouted louder. And Jesus stopped, in the middle of everything, and called for him. The beggar threw off his cloak, the one thing he owned, and stumbled forward. What do you want me to do for you? Jesus asked. And the man said, I want to see. And he did. Remember that. The crowd tried to silence the very cry that Jesus stopped to answer. Do not let anyone shame you out of crying for mercy. There is a Greek word that sits underneath these healing stories. Sozo. It is the word for healing. But it is also the word for saving, for rescuing, for making whole. When Jesus healed a body, the gospel writers used the same word they used for saving a soul. Because to him, they were never two different things. Hold that thought, because it is about to matter more than ever. Let me stop you here for 1 second, because we are entering the final stretch, and this is the part that changes everything. If you have made it this far with me, you are not a casual viewer. So keep one question in your mind as we go. What is the one thing in your life that feels dead? Keep it there. We are almost to the answer. Because now we come to the miracles that broke the boundary no human being has ever crossed back over. The dead. The first is a little girl. Her father is a man named Jairus, a leader of the synagogue, and his 12-year-old daughter is dying. He begs Jesus to come. But on the way, the news arrives. She is gone. Do not bother the teacher anymore. And Jesus says 5 words to a shattered father. Do not fear. Only believe. He walks into the house where everyone is already weeping, and he says the child is only sleeping, and they laugh at him. He takes her cold hand and says, in his own language, Talitha koum. Little girl, get up. And her eyes open. The second is worse, because there is no hope left at all. In a town called Nain, Jesus meets a funeral coming out of the city gate. A widow has lost her only son, which means she has now lost everything, her family and her future in one coffin. Jesus sees her, and the gospel says his heart broke for her. He had not been asked. No one begged him. He simply walked up to the open coffin, touched it, and said, "Young man, I say to you, arise." And the dead man sat up and began to speak. And Jesus gave him back to his mother. But the third one is the reason they finally decided he had to die. His name was Lazarus, and he was Jesus' friend. When Lazarus fell sick, his sisters Mary and Martha sent for Jesus. And Jesus, strangely, waited. By the time he arrived, Lazarus had been dead for 4 days. Sealed in a tomb. In that heat, the body would already be decaying. Martha meets him on the road, broken. "Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died." And then Jesus weeps. The shortest verse in the entire Bible. Jesus wept. God, standing at the grave of a friend, crying with the rest of them. And then he walks to the tomb. He tells them to roll the stone away. Martha protests, "The smell, it has been 4 days." And Jesus prays, and then he calls into the dark of the tomb with a loud voice, "Lazarus, come out." And a dead man, wrapped head to foot in grave clothes, shuffles out into the light. "Unwrap him," Jesus says, "and let him go." This is not a story about a number of miracles. This is not a story about a man with unusual powers. This is not a story about events from long ago that have nothing to do with you. This is a story about a God who walks straight up to the things that are dead and refuses to leave them that way. So what was the greatest miracle? I told you at the beginning it was not raising the dead. Here is what I meant. Every person Jesus raised, eventually died again. Lazarus walked out of that tomb, but he walked back into 1 year later. The little girl grew up and grew old. Those were signs. Beautiful, staggering signs. But they were arrows, all of them, pointing forward to one more tomb. His own. When Jesus walked out of his grave on the third day, he did not come back into this life like Lazarus did. He walked through death and out the other side into a life that can never die again. That is the miracle every other miracle was pointing at. The empty cup, the empty net, the empty grave, all of it was a sign that says, the thing that ran dry will be filled, and what comes back is better than what was lost. And there is a Roman historian, Josephus, writing later in the 1st century, who could not bring himself to call Jesus the Messiah but admitted plainly that he was a doer of wonderful works. Even the people who did not believe could not deny that something had happened. So what do you do with a man like this? Here is the first thing. The miracles were signs, not the destination. Jesus never healed a single person just to amaze them. Every wonder he did had an arrow on it, pointing past the gift to the giver, past the bread to the one who said, "I am the bread of life." Here is the second thing, and this one is for you. Every category of human brokenness shows up in these stories. Scarcity at Cana. Sickness in Capernaum. Shame in the leper. Fear in the storm. Hunger on the hillside. Blindness on the road. And death itself outside the tomb. There is no part of your life he did not walk straight into and touch. Not one. And here is the last thing. The deepest thing. Remember the question I asked you to hold. What is the thing in your life that feels dead? A relationship. A faith. A dream. A part of you that you have already given a funeral. Here is the whole point of every miracle in this video. The same voice that called into a sealed tomb and said, "Lazarus, come out," knows your name too. He is not afraid of the smell. He is not put off by how many days it has been. He still walks up to the things everyone else has given up on, and he still says, "Come out." So tell me down in the comments. Which miracle hit you the hardest tonight? The water at Cana, the storm going still, or the dead man walking out of the dark?